Hello, this is Martin from PointFire, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the features of SharePoint, multilingual features of SharePoint, and also I'll tell you a little bit about the PointFire products, how they fill in the gaps that those features of SharePoint are missing. Very happy to be here sponsoring CollabDays Barcelona. Sorry we can't be there in person this year, but maybe next year. We'll see. So first thing that we'll see is I'm going to talk a little bit about the features of SharePoint Online, multilingual features. I'll give a demo of the new multilingual page publishing feature that came out in June. Tell you a bit about what's missing in the multilingual story, even with this new feature. What are the gaps? I'll tell you how PointFire Translator, one of our products, fills in some of those gaps. Then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other SharePoint Online multilingual features. And then I'll tell you how PointFire 365 is a much more complete solution that fills in all of the gaps and makes SharePoint completely multilingual. So let's start off. When I'm talking about SharePoint Online multilingual features, one of the things is the multilingual page publishing feature that I was just talking about. I'll show you how that works. Variations is still there. Variations works for classic site. It never worked for modern sites. It has been officially deprecated, but it still works. Most of its features still mostly work. One of the features that no longer works is the machine translation service, which used to be able to translate classic pages. That's deprecated. It doesn't work for classic pages anymore. It never worked for modern pages, but now it doesn't work for classic pages either. It still works in the term store. You can still translate terms in your term store for now, but the service is very, very slow. It's become more difficult to use than it used to be on premise. Manage metadata, term store, that still works. You can have different text for different terms in your term store in different languages, and when somebody who has a different language goes to look at that managed metadata, they're going to see it in their own language if you've provided the translations. MUI is the multilingual user interface. That also works. There's a number of different user interface elements in SharePoint that support MUI. That is to say that they will show different text based on the user's current language preference. Okay, but first let's have a look at this new multilingual page publishing feature, and I'll show you very briefly how it works. So if you want to use it, then you go to the site languages, so language settings, and you can turn on this enable pages and use to be translated in multiple languages. You can turn it on for communication sites only. You can't turn it on for all modern sites, just communication sites. And then you select the languages. There's a base language in which a site was created, and then you can select any of a number of different languages. For each of the languages, you can determine who is going to be the translator. Anybody from your AAD can be a translator. So in this case, I have Amy Wong as the translator. For Chinese, I have Dr. Zoidberg as the translator for German. You still have to give them the rights to translate. Just naming them here doesn't give them the rights to translate. But what happens is when a page is created, they are going to get an email saying, please go and translate this page. And that's basically how the feature works. So here I have a modern page. This is Contoso de Fadas, is a children's publisher. It is it has a number of pages. I've set it up for Chinese and German. So I'm going to click on this translation tab, and that's going to give me a translation pane. And then it says it's going to create a copy of this page for each language, and then you can manually translate the content on each page. So I'm going to create this for all of the languages, which is to say Chinese and German, that I've configured here. And then let's go have a look at the Chinese page to see what it looks like. And it says this page has not been translated into Chinese. Edit to start translation. So it's still here in English, and somebody has to go and translate it. It's sent an email to Amy Wong, and presumably she will come in and translate it at some point. And when you see that it's been translated, you can publish it, and then it's going to be available to anyone who comes in whose language preference is Chinese is going to see the page in Chinese. You can go from one page to the other using this little toggle. This is a toggle for the content language. It is not a toggle for the it is not a toggle for the user interface language. Those are two different settings. The language of the user interface, the language of the content. Okay, so that's a quick demo. It's got more features, but don't have time to show them all to you. So what's missing from this? Well, obviously, one of the things that's missing is machine translation. You have to translate everything manually. It doesn't work with modern team sites. That's a shame. It doesn't work with classic sites either. So this new feature is only for modern communications sites. You cannot author content in alternate languages. So here you have to create new pages in English. If I wanted to create a new page in German on that site, well, I can't. It can't translate German to English. It can only let you translate English to German. There's a mismatch between the content language and the user interface language. So these are two different toggles. You can change your content language. The user interface is going to be in a different language, and vice versa. So there's no toggle for user interface language, which is a shame. It doesn't have any solution for populating the multilingual user interface. So any customization that you make to navigation, for instance, you have to figure out a way to translate that yourself. That's not part of this new feature. And also, it only covers pages. It doesn't cover lists or document libraries or events or anything else. So it does a good job for lists, but I'm sorry, it does a good job for pages, but it doesn't cover all these other features. So let's, one of the questions that people often ask, can you use the Bing Translation API to translate these pages? And the short answer is no, you can't. It's not going to work. The ASPX pages for these modern pages are just empty containers. They don't contain any text. They dynamically load the text. Text is stored in other places, and it's stored in ways that the API is not going to want to translate. It's encoded. There are all sorts of barriers to using the API for translating any of these modern pages. So there's no easy solution that you can do on your own. But luckily, PointFire Translator is able to do that to you. And I'm going to give you a quick demo, and it's going to be very, very simple because the interface that I have here is very, very simple. So you saw when I changed my language to Chinese, it told me it was still in English. You have to manually translate it. I'm going to change my language to German, and lo and behold, it is in German. So what's happened here is that PointFire Translator was connected to this site and was told to translate anything that should be in German into German. So this is what it's done. There is a Power Automate flow that has been set up, and whenever a new file is created in the site pages library, then it calls this custom connector to translate the document that's in there, and then it replaces it in the page library, and magically the German appears a few seconds after you tell it to translate. So this is wonderful. This is one of the interfaces that PointFire Translator has. It's got a number of other interfaces. So for instance, if you go to the page library and select it, you can tell it to translate any particular page. There's a SharePoint app. There's a web interface. You can tell it to translate individual documents. You can tell it to translate entire libraries, but it also translates other things. So PointFire Translator is actually a pretty powerful tool. It will have these interfaces: Power Automate, SharePoint app, web interface. It's got a command line interface. It's got a PowerShell interface. It will translate modern pages with and without the multilingual page publishing feature, and that includes both the communications sites and team sites. It will translate out of the box web parts, the content in there. It will translate classic pages. It will translate documents and document libraries: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, even PDF documents. It translates metadata for all of these documents. It translates list items. So, and it does that for SharePoint. It does it in OneDrive. It does it in lists. It supports almost all of the SharePoint languages. And it also supports a number of languages that SharePoint doesn't even support. So in all these cases, it is using a state-of-the-art neural network engine. So in the background, it's using an Azure Cognitive Services translation engine. It's either one of the human parity engines, which has a quality which is has the same score, quality score as humans get, or you can train your own neural network engine on your own documents, so it adopts your own vocabulary, your own style, using the custom translator feature. This is a product that's also in Azure. So extremely high translation quality here. Okay, let's talk about some of the other features, multilingual features of SharePoint. So multilingual user interface. There are a number of SharePoint user interface elements that can follow the user's language. They have different text in different languages, and that includes the site name, list names, column names, descriptions, content types. It includes view names. So there's about a dozen different things, and navigation is one of the big things that can have different text in different languages based on the user's preferred language. Managed metadata is one of these other things that can have different text in different languages. You have to remember that the content language and the user interface language are not necessarily synchronized. So the user interface language setting uses one setting, content language setting uses another setting. They're not necessarily the same. You can have what is called a mixed language experience, which is to say you get two different languages on the same page. It's confusing for users, and synchronizing the two is not a feature of SharePoint. If you want to add translations to these MUI elements, you have to do it manually. It's a bit of a complicated process. It's very time consuming. And it's also quite confusing to do. I'm talking about the user interface language setting. So it is hidden away. It's a simple 11-step process to find it somewhere in your user profile. And the last bit is after you save it, you should wait about 10 minutes for it to take effect. So it takes a little while to change your user interface language. This is one of the ways to do it. The other way affects different parts of the user interface. This is the Office 365 account settings, not the profile settings, the account settings. It's easier to find. It's a little simpler. However, the last step is that it tells you to please log out of your account and log back in again. And some of it will not take effect until the next day. So it's a little easier, but not as useful. It doesn't cover everything. So let's have a look at PointFire 365 now. PointFire 365 is one of our other products, and it covers a lot more user interface features than PointFire Translator did. So first, let's have a look at this page. So for instance, I'm on this page. My language is English, my user interface is English, my content is in English. I'm going to change my language preference. And here, this is something that PointFire adds to your personal menu, is the ability to toggle your language preference and to do it instantly. So here I've changed my language to French. Excuse me. It repaints the page. My user interface is in French, my content is in French, I'm on the same page. So how did I do that? So I'll show you one of the features that allows you to do that. This is a bit of a power user feature. This is not what we recommend for most users. However, it gives a nice demo. So so here, in fact, we have two versions of the content on the same page. And if I look at this web part, this particular web part will display only in English, whereas this other web part will display only in French. Okay, so it is possible with PointFire. This is something that PointFire adds to all web parts. Out-of-the-box web parts, custom web parts, app parts, classic web parts, modern web parts, SPFX web parts, anything. You can tag them according to the language in which they should display. So this is one of the features that is added to all web parts. It's not necessarily what you're probably better off having two different pages, each with content in one language, rather than one page with two different versions of the content, because otherwise you confuse authors. But if you're for your power users, this is a very powerful thing to use. So this tagging by language is also extended to things like document libraries. So if I go to my document library, my language is English. So I see nothing but English documents in my document library. If my language is French, then what I would see is nothing but French documents. Okay? In actual fact, all the documents in all the languages are in the same library. It's just that the ones that I see are just the ones in my preferred language unless I turn off this language filter. Okay, and this works for classic, modern mode, any document library, any list. If I go to a list, I will see the items in my language. Any that have not yet been translated, I have the option of using PointFire Translator to translate them. So people can just author content in their own language, and then a separate process or a different person will translate it for them. They don't have to understand how this language switching works, and they don't have to worry about other languages other than their own. If you go to a page, here's a page called accueil.aspx, but this very same page, if my language is English, would be home.aspx and would be an English page. So this works like any document library. You just tag it by language or translate it, and it's going to show it in the user's own language. Okay, so this is how it handles lists, libraries, metadata, pages. It handles calendars as well. Now let's see how we translate the user interface. So I said we populate the user interface. There's a very simple feature here. It is a 3-step process, by which I mean that you have to press 3 buttons. And the first button is it's going to search the site for any user interface element that supports MUI but that does not yet have a translation. It's going to find all of those navigation nodes, content types, column names, and so forth, and it's going to put them into a list. This is an ordinary SharePoint list with the proposed translations in the languages that you've selected. The second step is it's going to offer suggested translations for everything. So it's going to reuse translations that you've used before elsewhere on the same hub. It's going to reuse the same translations as SharePoint uses if you're using some of the same terms. And then it's going to use machine translation to fill in all those gaps, those things that are not yet translated. You can edit the list, any term that, if you use a different term in your organization, that's fine. You can just go and change it in that list. And then step 3 is you apply the translations, and so it's going to use that list to fill in the MUI objects right in SharePoint with the translations that you've selected. So MUI can all be done in a simple 3-step process, 3 button clicks. If that's too much work, then you can automate it. There's PowerShell scripts that will provision for you. It will read it and do all of this offline without you having to do anything. So that covers pretty well all of the aspects of SharePoint. When you first turn on the feature, you simply select the languages that you want, and that will set everything up, the list, the libraries, the language toggle, the MUI for those languages, and synchronize everything together. So let's have just a quick look at what that means in terms of features. So PointFire 365 is a SharePoint Online of PointFire on-premise. If you want these features on-premise, we have them there as well. 2 different people going to the same URL will each see the user interface and the content in their own preferred language, and you can change your preferred language quickly with a fast toggle right there on every page. You can tag web parts by language, you can tag documents and lists by language, you can tag pages by languages, and any of these lists or libraries that you go to are going to be filtered according to the user's language, unless they want to turn off that filtering to see everything. You can it will manage and populate the MUI, the multilingual user interface. It works for any classic site, any modern site, team site, communication site, any classic site. It supports all 50 languages that SharePoint supports. From a translation point of view, you can also translate to other languages that SharePoint doesn't support, but SharePoint won't be giving you all the features there. So it is a very complete solution for any of your multilingual site needs. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us. You can download the software for free. It's a free trial. We will give you support, and you can try it out, see if it fulfills your requirements. Thank you very much, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions.